my core and my foundation of service was not ever to be someone, it was to do something. And so when you think about things that way, you approach things very, very authentically.
As we go forward, how easy or difficult is it to be an American diplomat right now?
Just to try to find something in common with someone. And then the tribalism, even if it's like shed little by little, it will start evaporating. My name is Shefali Razdan Duggal, the recently retired United States Ambassador to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And this is Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Yeah. My name is Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing."
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. It's not easy to connect the dots from India to Ohio to the National Finance Committee of a presidential campaign to being the first U.S. ambassador of color to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. But that's exactly where we find ourselves today, and particularly for me, as a really great treat in catching up with my friend, Shefali Razdan Duggal. Shefali has been a leader now as a political advocate in gender equity and in diplomacy, and of course, most importantly, doing it all with purpose and kindness. Shefali, what a great treat, and I'm so grateful to catch up with you today. Thanks for joining Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And it's so wonderful to be with you as a friend, Abhay. That's actually the greatest privilege of this experience.
Yeah, and I mean, more than anything else, like I said, I wish we're doing this in person, but most importantly, we're doing this. So that's the key.
Exactly.
I've shared chats with congressional members and artists and CEOs and change makers. And a lot of times for them, in any capacity, there's always this feeling of kinship and connection with peers. I haven't shared many conversations with ambassadors. So in a way, I'm just so curious, is there almost a camaraderie of service that you now share with others as ambassadors in this space? I know you're on the Council of American Ambassadors, but especially having been through that experience, having now exited that experience, what has been that kind of kinship or peer space that you've come to appreciate in this capacity?
Sure, that's a great question. So I'll answer the one that's probably top line, which is yes, all of the ambassadors, political and career, there is a connectivity between us. So as an example, when I was going through my process to become an ambassador, you go through something in Washington, D.C., FSI, the Foreign Service Institute. In my class, it's a 3-week instruction. There were 23 career ambassador nominees and 5 politicals. And we all became extremely close. We're still on a WhatsApp group together and we're loving on each other, supporting each other.
Yeah.
But beyond that, yes, when you're serving also, it is very easy to dial up any ambassador, US ambassador around the world to get guidance and opinions and talk with them about policy matters. I also had several ambassadors that I tapped as I would say mentors, and who had done this before, who really cared about me doing well because we care about the United States doing well. So yes, that camaraderie absolutely exists before, during, and frankly after as well. Like we're all very close. I would also say that the way that I approached public service, whether it was in the space of politics or whether it was in the space of policy, the camaraderie isn't just necessarily on the same level that you're serving.
Yeah.
So when I came to the embassy, that was something I made very, very clear. I was serving in the Netherlands as U.S. ambassador. It's called a mission, which is not meant as a verb. It's meant as a subject. A mission means the U.S. embassy and all the consulates in that in that host nation from the United States. So
Yeah.
my mission, I made it very clear right from the beginning, right when I landed, that yes, I understand there's a hierarchy. I understand this is the way the State Department and frankly military does it, but I need you to know I'm approaching all of you as my equals because I'm here to serve my country, my nation, my president, but also I'm here to serve you, which means I can only get better by learning from your already rich experiences.
Yeah.
And so I treated everyone from the gardener to other ambassadors from other countries that were serving in The Hague the same. And
Yeah.
that was actually very well known. So I would say the camaraderie in service wasn't just top level. It was infiltrated through every level, and that frankly makes the mission stronger, more well functioning, healthier. People feel seen, people feel respected, and ultimately everyone does a better job then.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how that squashing of the hierarchy and the establishment of sort of peer relationships makes that much more obvious to everyone around you. And, I love how you said that basically the diplomat who might be serving, in another space or even, in another country to, someone who's doing an incredible job at the embassy or a gardener or anyone really has that same connectivity of just being human and that sort of humanity that connects us all.
Mhm.
When you were doing this, I mean, you shared that this experience of service and the mission was sort of a love story for you,
Mhm.
and involved obviously some barrier breaking and some breaking of some cultural norms even, but especially to make it fruitful and also kind of as you just described, that much more endearing, not to mention enduring, but just definitely endearing as well. How much balancing of institutional protocol, because hierarchy is not something that you can break with a magic wand or just really just get rid of like right away. So how much balancing of that kind of institutional protocol and maybe the sort of systemic hierarchy that you described was there, and of course your own personality and that ethos and that mantra of trying to make sure that everyone is connected as peers, how much of that balancing was involved in truly making this a love story so that you can describe it as a love story?
Yeah, so it is a love story because I mean the love story's foundation for me was my love of the United States and my incredible gratitude for what this country has done for me. My core and my foundation of service was not ever to be someone, it was to do something. And
Mm,
so when you think about things that way, you approach things very, very authentically. And you're not looking for your next job, you're not looking for your next promotion. You're doing it just because you are in love with your country. You're in love with the concept of what the United States has done for you and your family. So yes, there was certainly I did approach this very differently, which was initially a bit surprising for both, frankly, the State Department, the embassy. It wasn't surprising in the world of politics because the White House taps the political nominee. And so they
yeah.
knew, and having worked 17 years in politics, everyone was pretty well aware of my
Who you
personality.
were. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think I'm warm, I'm very affectionate, I'm very open. Going into the world of the State Department, it was very new for them because they're all correct ways, but
Hmm.
they're different.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was barrier breaking in that not just that I was the first person of color, but I deeply believe that you bring your best self to the job, and that's when you do the best job.
Yeah.
And I knew that my number one priority was to serve my country and serve my president and go there for the bilateral mission that I was sent there for. And frankly, the multilateral mission being, the highest ranking US official in that country. And that carries a lot of responsibility. I will say people have this belief that being an ambassador is a lot of party throwing and, you know, like whining and dining. And I know you and I have spoken about this. I worked 90 hours a week, and it was almost completely all policy, you know, work. And there were big issues: Ukraine, Israel, China, the semiconductors. Like, it was a heavy policy job of which you're reading and reading and reading and executing on that information. What I felt was you can do all that, but still be yourself. And so I did do that. And initially it was because myself, my personality isn't necessarily very stiff, and it's very, you know, and like what you're seeing now, like let's say how I'm dressed, I would dress like this to a very important meeting,
Right.
because what matters is what's in your brain, and presenting in a professional way, but sharing the knowledge, having a positive relationship, showing the best of the United States, but also when you are yourself, frankly, the stakeholders on the other side, the interlocutors, they view you as a trustworthy person if they see you as being authentic. And that was something that I was told many, many times in the Netherlands by the Dutch, which they really appreciate authenticity there. And they said initially, it was pretty well known within their government that she is very different than what we've seen before and even what we experienced, but she is as real as it comes. And then I immediately, my stock with them went through the roof, because they trusted what I was saying was true. I was not dancing around things, but I did it with kindness. I did it with a lack of ego, because I viewed the relationship to be one of equals. We're learning from each other. And so, and in the embassy also, in the mission, they were, as I mentioned, a little, not everyone, but some people were startled by how I did business. I was walking around, I was saying hi to people, I was sitting in the lunchroom with them. I would be like, you know, I would be hanging out with a maintenance crew, you know, and it was,
you were being you, basically.
yes. And then they saw, one, it was authentic, because you never know when someone comes in. Is this real? Is the other shoe going to drop? And I had many, many friends that came to visit me while I was in the Netherlands. So then even at the embassy, they started seeing it was almost indirectly a referral to all of them. Like, this woman has friends from when she was 8 years old. She has friends, you know, it was all very positive. And frankly, how well I do at these meetings with the Dutch, it trickles down to every level of the embassy. So they ultimately saw like this very new and different style they hadn't experienced. There was no sunlight between Shefali in professional settings and Shefali talking to my friend when I was 6 years old. Like,
it's not a show.
It's not a show. And when I was leaving, I will say, one of the folks in the Dutch government, really lovely woman, said to me, it was after the election and people knew I was leaving, and they said, she said to me, wow, it must have been so hard for you to be yourself in such an environment that's not like this. And I answered her with the opposite, which was, it would have been much, much harder for me to be someone I'm not. And so, and when she registered that, it made all the sense in the world.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, you know, it would have been much harder for you to not behave that way. And for that matter, being in an environment where there's policies, there's protocols. And I love how you mentioned that, you know, your aspiration, of course, is always more about what you do than who you become or who you are. I'm imagining that, of course, for those who may not necessarily be familiar with this whole idea of just being yourself and being authentic and gaining trust that way, that takes practice for them to have to actually like go through that and see that. And certainly this, of course, made some great inroads with the Dutch. Do you think that this made any big inroads in the State Department?
Yeah, it actually did.
Yeah.
It did. I do know that. So, I'll first say after the election, the State Department, the Blinken State Department released their list of top 12 political ambassadors around the world. And I was so thrilled when I was on that list. It's called the Sue B. Cobb Award. And
Yeah,
I think, I mean, it was a testament because all the folks on that list were incredible, and we all brought something new and different to the role. But yes, it did have inroads at state also. We were also, and I'm talking about the Blinken State Department, the
sure.
Biden State Department.
Yeah,
My embassy, I had 450 people who worked for me.
yeah,
And we were the leading DEIA forward mission in all of Europe for the United States, and we were featured for that. Along with the bilateral work, I was also on my own working on DEIA, Holocaust remembrance, uplifting women, going into lower socioeconomic neighborhoods, doing things that had never been done before.
yeah,
But the State Department, because of the way I did things, young women at the State Department, specifically young women of color, I didn't realize it was like rushing through all of their circles, like, you need to see what this one's doing in the Netherlands.
it's like a magnet that everyone is trying to just say, hey,
Well,
take a
I
look.
hope that's what it was.
Yeah,
Our social media was also very, very authentic. Like,
yeah,
where, again, we did a lot of policy work, but my focus was to connect with the Dutch. And
mm,
so our social media was very loving and very open and frankly lighthearted. It was running through the State Department what I was doing, and it also became known amongst circles.
yeah,
She's really open. If
yeah,
you reach out to her, because this again in the State Department, there's the stratification, and
sure.
so a lot of as someone who's working deep in the State Department has been trained to, you don't email an ambassador directly, but
Hmm.
they all heard, not only does Shefali like that, she responds.
She's going to
She
answer
does
you. Yeah,
she does phone calls with you. She
yeah,
does Zooms with you. She mentors. And so it was rushing all through. And I was told that there were multiple people of color that were applying to come and serve in the Netherlands because I was there. And
yeah,
there were many that came. And then I left on January 19th. And so there's been some changes, but it made me feel very, very good that it resonated. I will also say that the way we operated affected women of color, people of color in the Netherlands too,
mm,
because they had
yeah,
never seen the topics I was focused on. They had never seen that happen before. And they also heard about how open I was. And so they were always trying to do events with us. And my public diplomacy team was so busy. My Pol Econ team was so busy because we were getting so many requests. And I rarely, rarely said no, because
yeah,
I felt it was so important to show that the United States is about accessibility, about kindness, I walked into this role and I openly would say, this is the United States. I'm
mm,
an immigrant to the
yeah,
US, grew up with nothing, grew up
yeah,
being raised by a single mom who worked 2 minimum wage jobs. This is what can happen. I am the United States. And my job now is to both, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams and
right.
also pay it forward. So
Yeah,
yes, there was movement both at
yeah,
state and at the mission and with the Dutch, just by the sake of being yourself. Now, I do want to add, when I say being yourself, I would often tell people that doesn't mean I'm doing this so every person after me is like as joyful. And being yourself means being myself so the next person,
can
or
therefore be themselves.
they
Yep.
can be themselves.
Yeah,
And so if they're whatever they are, but they're themselves.
yeah.
And so I did it for me, but I did it for others also. So,
Yeah, I love that in the sense that it's not a blueprint to duplicate, but actually to now sort of like accelerate for
yeah.
people afterwards. And you touch upon a couple of things here which are really striking for me because one, the thought of authenticity and transparency and kindness and availability and access is not always those aren't always the descriptors we use for people in sort of high positions of either power or at an institution like the State Department. And yet, the climate that we find ourselves in, and this was true, this has probably, been evolving for many administrations now, but of course, they are climates of tribalism and exclusivity, particularly that sort of like toxicity of that tribalism tends to be growing. And so your experiences tend to be sort of like a much, much more refreshing perspective on that. And obviously, it didn't come without its challenges and whatnot. But how have times changed now? And especially as we go forward, how easy or difficult is it to be an American diplomat right now? Especially in that backdrop of tribalism and toxicity, especially because it just feels like at least the perception is that those are winning.
Yeah. Well, I don't know where that might be the perception. I know internationally it was a big shift.
Yeah,
It's a big shift from what we were doing, not just the diplomats, but the government was doing to now. I'm not serving as a diplomat right now, but what I do know is that the career folks that often start in their 20s and it's for pure love of country.
sure.
They are not doing it for the money, because I can tell you there is not money to be had in this.
Yeah,
This is for pure love of country, duty to the concepts, the incredible foundational concepts of the United States. So they are charged with executing upon the policies of whatever administration are in place.
sure.
What I always used to say, because there were often young people, as in any country, young people who are the ones who are challenging the most, as they should.
Yeah,
And people asked me, because if there was an issue with something with the Biden administration, I would be at universities, and young people would ask very thoughtful questions of, well, what if you
passionately.
weren't passionately, thoughtfully, well, what if you don't agree?
Yeah,
And so I had the very simple answer of, if you are serving your government wherever you are in the world and you don't agree and you can't execute upon it, then you need to leave that job.
mm,
So it's not to say that the diplomats now agree or disagree. Their job is to be neutral.
yeah,
And so that's also why, Abhay, it is particularly challenging, painful to see the mass firings and, and sometimes the volunteer retirements that are happening, because these are people that put all their love into this country.
yeah,
And it was a bit surprising for them. Every organization, whether governmental or private, can certainly clean up. I get
sure.
that. Like, complacency can happen. I completely understand that. But I think that's why for a lot of us, it was very hard to see people who put their heart and soul into their jobs that now somewhat, not always, but sometimes arbitrarily are being let go, because each person has a soul, each person has a family, each
Mm,
person had hopes and dreams. Now, what I will say is, in this, I am an eternal optimist. People do know that. We have had ups and downs in our democracy many times in
yeah,
our relatively short 250-year history of the United States, but resilience and goodness does always win. And I believe that we're just in a moment of self-reflection, and it is, you were mentioning tribalism. I will say tribalism and exclusivity, I've always been, those are antithetical to me as a human,
sure.
as an immigrant to the US, because this country is based off of the thoughtful brilliance of both people that have been here for generations and people that come here seeking to better their lives and also improve the
Yeah,
United States. So it's not to anyone's benefit to further exclude them. It's really not. And but the concept of the United States will stand firm, but we're in a moment.
yeah.
We're in a
I
moment,
think
but
we
I
can
have,
safely say that.
but I do have faith, that
Yeah,
it will come back around. But it's, when that'll happen, quietly, I have my own hopes,
yeah,
but it will. But
yeah,
we're in a difficult moment. I think that a very important thing to focus on also is that we cannot lose the hope of goodness prevailing, because when that happens, or when we become complacent,
that's when things fail. Yeah.
that's when, yes, I mean, that's when the systems do start really breaking.
Yeah.
We have to. Now, does everyone fight back in the same way? No. One person is through the ballot box. One person is through making a donation. One person, it's by talking to their children about, I need you to know that what you're seeing at whatever moment in time is not necessarily the way we should be conducting our lives.
Sure.
Everyone does it their own way. I think it is very important to mention. So as you mentioned Cincinnati in the beginning, born in India, grew up in Cincinnati, grew up around exceptionally conservative humans. And I always found a way to have some kind of thread of commonality. So as we are dealing with people, I do want to emphasize it is important to not make people our enemies. Adversaries are not enemies. They have different thinking, short of flat out racists, which I probably draw the line there as well.
Yes.
But just to try to find something in common with someone, and then the tribalism, even if it's shed by a little by little, it will start evaporating.
I totally agree with that. And it's so wonderful to be reminded of that over and over again, right? I mean, we can't remind ourselves enough of that. Through our plurality, we bring unity. We find that optimism. There's hope all around. Many different ways of doing that, like you mentioned, and people don't always have the same pace of this, or even the same urgency sometimes, but there's a lot of importance in listening. There's a lot of importance in engaging, and we have to keep that optimism certainly all around us. I want to go back to one of the things that you mentioned of sort of, your own story. And it was obviously so moving, and you clearly were very emotional when you were sworn in as ambassador. Vice President Harris obviously was performing that ceremony with you had your hand over the Gita, your mom, your husband were there as witnesses. How much of that story, we talked about this earlier, but how much of that story of connecting the dots here as an immigrant from India, as an Indian American, as a daughter of a single mom, as a daughter of Ohio, for that matter, how much is all of that really kind of informed your work, but particularly added to your view of patriotism in a way that really binds and translates to this view of possibility and of collectivism here? Help us connect the dots of that particular story now to American patriotism in the 2025 that we're in.
Yeah. Thank you. So in brief, you mentioned a few things. So born in India, raised in Cincinnati, raised by a single mom, as I mentioned. She worked 2 minimum wage jobs. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. I'm a 2-time assault survivor. Also, once when I was 24, once when I was 29. And when I was 29, I was 7 months pregnant, both times by strangers, 2-time anorexic. So I feel like I've experienced a lot of different things. And I deeply believe, going back to, it all went into a pot, and I had to decide what to do with all this trauma. And I made the decision of looking forward, being positive, treating others with love and kindness. I never wanted people to feel the way I did at certain points in my life. And I realized that by God's grace, first and foremost, and then working really hard, working with integrity, working with really kindness, lack of ego is huge. Having no expectation, just working for love of country, because at the end of the day, I looked at every millimeter that I was moving was a millimeter that could only happen in the United States, because this is a country at its very base that does not care. Like Abraham Lincoln has this great quote that says, I'm destroying this quote, but he effectively says, I don't care who your grandfather is. What are you going to do?
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's effectively how I approach things, which is this is a country that doesn't care who your parents are, doesn't care how much money you have, doesn't care about your connections. What it does care about is how hard are you going to work? And those are the people that start making movement. Now, what level of movement that varies, but that's where my sense of patriotism came from, because I thought there was no other country that could lift my mother up, who would have been thrown away in
Right.
many other countries in the world. My father left her in a lurch, and we haven't seen him for decades and decades and decades. And she got married at 20, which is not so late in India, but had the typical, and didn't
Yes.
see her husband till her wedding day, and had no skills when he left. So what was she going to do? Yes, she had 2 jobs, and it was a lot, and she worked to the bone, but where else could she do that? She was able to get a car. Where else could she do that? And so I developed this deep sense of patriotism from that point forward. So that informs every single thing I do. And it's also the base of what I look at everything. If something difficult happens in my life or around me, I always base it to, but I've been through so much worse,
Right.
I've been there. And so nothing seems impossible to me, or nothing really gets to me so deeply and stalls me, because I always think I've been through worse. I've been
Yeah.
through worse.
Yeah.
And so that's how it informed my work. Now, what I will also say is, coming up, and whether it's spoken about or not, in politics, there's a tremendous amount of ego sometimes.
Really? Come on.
Yeah, no, not from me, but I remember coming up, whether it was in politics, or even, let's say, sometimes as ambassador, and how often I felt overlooked. And because for any number of metrics, it could have been,
Right.
you can make the guesses what they could be. And it could
Sure.
be as simple as I'm a nice person, or it could be something more complex, whatever the reasons were. I got overlooked so often. And I remember how that felt every time. I may not have voiced it, I may not have complained about it to anyone around me, but I always remember how badly it felt when someone dismissed me, whether it was
Yeah.
for a position or even at a moment. Like if I was in front of an elected and there was this enormous ego around that elected, and I used to think that was normal. I'm like, oh, that's just the way they are. Then when I became a principal myself,
Yeah.
a principal meaning the ambassador, the
Yeah.
main person there,
Yep.
I thought that, oh boy, I looked back at those moments of, hey, and I realized that was a choice that those people made to behave like that. And I'm making the choice to not do that,
Right.
because I remember how that gardener felt when no one talked to them. I remember I've been told that so many times by people that you saw me when the other people just walked right by me and you came and talked to me. So that also, frankly, fuels into my sense of patriotism, because to
Yeah,
be a
of course.
grateful American this is a country that is a meritocracy. So
Yeah.
at what point do you think you're better than someone else? Because that's not a meritocracy. That's just you being a jerk.
Right. Let's just call
I was
it
going to
for
use
what it
another
is,
word.
right? Yeah.
I was getting, but there are kids watching. But I was going
But you know what? It's amazing because, in a way, letting go of ego, trying to boil it down to the basics of just don't be a jerk when it comes to being seen, being heard, making sure that you're not being overlooked. You've, of course, spent many, many years in organizations and rooms and cultivating deep relationships, building a culture of exactly what you just meant, which is feeling included, making sure you include others around you, widening the tent for people, advancing equity. In the Democratic Party and in other, places, Emily's List, and, on campaigns. And then, of course, driving a strategy that's built around that and
Yeah.
executing on that strategy. And whether it is in finance or fundraising, like you said, you know what? Look, just everyone, don't be a jerk. When you are living that example and you know what it's like to actually be overlooked and you know what it's like to have gone through trauma, but the people around you are not necessarily living with that same kind of ethos, and they have egos and they have their hierarchical ways of thinking of things. What's the secret for them and even for you of unlearning? How have you had to, in a way, kind of deprogram people away from those kinds of things? And how do you go about the sort of unlearning or the relearning process? How do you share that kind of unlearning in a way that doesn't feel like you're preaching either?
Oh, absolutely. So actually, as with all things, it's what you do, not what you say.
Right.
So I actually, let's say, for instance, whether it was in that job or my everyday life, before I went, after I'm home here in San Francisco, like I'm not actually telling people what to do or how to act.
Yeah.
You know, if I would see someone behaving badly, in my opinion, I wouldn't tell them, gosh, you would do so much better if you were nicer, because that's just not my style.
Yeah.
I would just react by continuing to be myself. And frankly, consistency is the key. You know, whether it's that person finally absorbing it, and that person may never absorb it. And that's not my job to
Right.
make someone else a better person. It's not. It's not my job. What my job is to be the best version of myself, to create positive energy around me. And if you choose to absorb that or not, that is your decision. If you come and approach me with a sense of arrogance for whatever, whether it's professional or personal, I will react as myself.
Mm.
You can choose how you then deal with that. Often people, what I will say is people, like, you know, they view the world through their own vision. So if a person comes through with their own trauma and they've chosen a different way, I chose one way to behave, which
Yeah.
was I want to heal myself, and I want to heal as much as I can the world around me, because I don't want them to feel the way I did.
Sure.
Other people react differently. Now, if they react differently to their trauma, it is a conscious choice that everyone makes every
Yeah.
day, how they want to behave. It's their choice. I had actually a sign outside of my office, my direct office in the embassy, that, and I everyone knows I love quotes, and I actually infused that everywhere in the embassy. You saw a quote, and they're like, "Oh, that's the ambassador put up a quote," and like there's a quote. The in front of my office was work.
Was that the embassy's version of bad dad jokes for the moment, or there's another Shefali
Probably.
quote coming?
Yeah, no, actually, they used to always tease me, like, "What's the quote?" In every speech, there was always a quote, and they're like, "What's she gonna put in?" And so
Right.
you would always see people smile, because that was my thing. That's been my thing since I was, like, very young.
Yeah.
But there was a quote outside of my office that was so simple. It was a big sign that said, "Work hard and be nice."
Yeah.
It was just so simple.
So simple.
We don't know why people behave the way that they do, right? Like, we don't know. But giving them the grace of, maybe it's a moment or maybe it's a personality, I don't know, but we just have to remain consistent. And then eventually a trust does develop over time when they see, again, going back to authenticity, that, oh, this person's for real
Yeah.
and she's still approaching me in this way. Okay. And there were a lot of barriers that did come down
Yeah.
because of that, once they realized it was genuine, you know?
I wonder if that translates to, at the highest levels and at the levels of motivation for those who are earlier in that journey, that it allows people to not only cultivate that trust, but they let down their guard, and then hopefully that ego dissipates a little bit. You know, you mentioned the Lincoln, ethos of, I don't care who your grandparents were. I need to care about the work you're doing today and what you mean to the country, and having that sort of agnostic background. The mission at hand is to improve and advance, the mission of the United States. In a way, we're living in a climate where, seemingly at least, people do care about your ancestry. People do care about who your grandparents were, because they translate that to what they think will equate to your forthcoming work. So, how have you dealt with those two contrasts?
Well, it kind of goes back to a couple questions ago, a couple comments ago about the base concept of the United States, the foundation of the United States, what the founders envisioned the United States to be is not always consistent with what people practice, but I really do deeply believe that it will get back to goodness, but it is difficult now because things that were really uplifted and frankly, this isn't a Democrat Republican thing because
No.
I've been
Yeah.
saying this, like, there are tremendous Republicans, and I'm very bipartisan. I have so many friends that are Republicans. I have so many friends that are Trump Republicans. I
Yeah.
have friends that are senior in the Trump administration. I adore them. But it is incorrect to think that there is a certain superiority of one lineage over another. It's incorrect. I mean, that is not what this country is about. This is a country where you don't have to be born of a certain cell makeup or even born in this country. Like, I'm naturalized. I'm a
Yeah.
naturalized citizen. And the fact is like Madeleine Albright actually said this when she was Secretary of State, when she was going through her hearing, where she said, I'm a chosen American. And sometimes we have almost more loyalty and more dedication because we chose this path.
Yeah.
And we have so much gratitude. So it is incorrect to think that there is a superiority, and it's confounding to me. And it's hurtful. It's
Yeah.
hurtful to people that have dedicated so much of their lives, not just for their own benefit to come to the United States. It's maybe, a family comes here for a better life, but then they do contribute to the greatness of the United States. Like, I know people talk about the CEOs and okay, fine, that's all true. Let's not even talk about that. Let's just talk about the incredible culture of the United States. It's multifaceted. This country was based on people fleeing another continent because they felt persecuted.
So what do you say to those people who, given this exact idea of everything that you just mentioned, the kind of foundational principles of Americanism, what do you say to those people who may be Indian American or not? What do you say to those people who are like, you know what, boy, I really don't know if the American ideal is alive anymore. I think I may need to move abroad. These have been proud Americans for so long, you know?
I know, and I'm hearing that from some friends. And,
Yeah.
I've actually had some friends who moved abroad for a temporary period of time. What I would say to that is the United States is not the definition of who's occupying whomever it is, the Oval Office. That is
Mm,
not the United,
yeah.
and that's even in like the very best of times. It is not who one human's vision. It's not. The
Yeah.
concept of the United States is stronger and greater and more resilient. Now, that said, there are moments that can move the country back a few steps, and it could take the next leadership team some time
Hmm.
to correct
Yeah.
that. And frankly, it takes, because my experience now is more internationally based, it takes time for them to develop the trust again. Because,
Yeah.
there's the simple concept of it takes years for trust. And that's like in personal behavior too, right? It takes years for trust to develop, and it could just be a moment when it all falls apart. And so you have to rebuild that. So that is a factual thing as well. Now, for
Mm,
people who are wanting to move and who have moved, that is what is best for their mental state of mind. I cannot say to them what is right or wrong. It's what's best for them.
yeah.
But what I would say is to remember that administrations don't determine the greatness of a country that from its birth 250 years ago to n- now or in the recent times could become the greatest country on earth.
Yeah.
That comes with a certain, as we talked about, ethos of this country, and that does not get wiped away from a moment in time.
Mm,
The moment in time will be properly historically documented, but it doesn't change the foundation of the goodness of this country. And we need to also make sure we continue to say that, because whether it's the younger generation of the United States, Abhay, or let's even go on the other end. I'm very close to multiple World War II vets that,
Yeah.
by God's grace, they're healthy and spunky. And, I just went to visit a 104-year-old and a 99-year-old in New York City.
Wow.
They fought, during World War II for our country. It's not just the younger generation. We need to remind Holocaust survivors. We need to remind civil rights leaders, elders, but also outside of the country, these incredibly bright humans that want to come, whether it's to open a store or send their children to college. We need to keep enough of a goodness there so they believe that they still can see the United States as the shining city on a hill.
Yeah, that's a great reminder you and I are both parents of adult children. And what it makes me think of is that it's not just literally the prospect of youth and innovation and how things get moved forward, but it's reminding ourselves that we have so many lessons to learn and really take forward from the past. And those people who have lived through just completely just era changing events and lots to be of incredible Americans that are reminding of this every day. Let me get you out of here on this one, because we've talked a lot and wound our way through patriotism and your service, and certainly what it takes to lead, whether it's leading for party or leading for country or leading for mission, for that matter. But there's a tulip now named after you, and the Tulipa Shefali. I think I'm pronouncing that correct.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So the Tulipa Shefali, right? This is this pink fuchsia colored flower. And the symbolism, of course, of that in the Netherlands, of so much caring and kindness and prosperity and good wishes, lots of superlatives there, right? When you think about that tulip and you think about embarking on new chapters now, right? Whether that be inspiring or leading or writing or, future service, how does that tulip maybe symbolize some of your future aspirations?
That is such a wonderful question. Thank you. And yes, there was a tulip named after me in the Netherlands. The Dutch named a tulip. The tulip, to them, I equate it to, it's our bald eagle. It is their symbol. And I'm the first ambassador from any country to have a tulip named after them. And they had asked me, what color would you like? They surprised me and told me, it was through during an event, and two gentlemen let me know we're going to be doing this. And I was like, I was so confused. I'm like, what? And the staff went running after them, and they're like, oh yeah, we decided. I told them my favorite color, and then they force bloomed a brand new one for me. And it's shown in their gardens. It's really nice. It means a lot. Now, why that was an important moment, how it does have a connectivity to what you were saying with new chapters. It was important, of course, on a personal level, what an honor, but it was at the State Department, it was viewed as such a symbolic moment, because it showed that the Dutch, they were the first country to have ever acknowledged the United States to be independent. So it's our oldest ally for the United States. For them to do this was a symbol, a message to the White House and to the State Department and to the United States broadly. We like how they're doing business in our country right now. We like how this mission is operating and how they're treating us. So while it's so sweet, but it was a bigger, much bigger message they were sending. And so how does that connect to new chapters, of which there are different things I'm doing right now and I'm working through right now? It was a very big message to me of, again, going back to the beginning of what we talked about, stay true to yourself. Because when you do things from your soul, from your heart, from the depths of being genuine, having good intentions in the world, even in very complicated, high profile moments, you can still be all of those things, be incredibly effective, but also do it with love and kindness. That to me was incredibly symbolic to everything. I had lived like that before, but it was almost like in this professional, very professional setting, because I say politics and policy are, while interconnected, political work and policy work, there are very different personalities.
Yeah, true.
And it told me that whatever chapters are unfolding for me next, to continue to trust my instinct, continue to be myself, remember that while most people receive it well, the ones that don't focus too much on, unless you can honestly learn from them. Sometimes you really can. Like
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton said that, like, pay attention. You could learn something from people that have challenges with you,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's just from their own issues. And so it really was comforting to me. And that Tulip, it's a good way of wrapping it all up, but that's how I know to move forward in this next exciting chapter of my life, being myself,
Yeah.
doing things from a good place, having kindness. But at the same time, I do want to say, while you can be very kind and open, one must also be thoughtful, which is sometimes where to be polite, but keep the barriers around. And that's not an unhealthy thing. That's actually a very good thing to do. That shows growth emotionally and spiritually. Still be polite, but know intentions of others. So
Well, I think that's very elegantly stated, but more than anything else, staying true to yourself, staying true to your country, staying true to mission, and more importantly, doing it with kindness and thoughtfulness and purpose. It obviously is something that you're doing so well. Shefali, thank you so much for joining me today. What an absolute treat, and I hope we can catch up again in the future.
Oh, I'll see you soon. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be on. It was just such a delight. Thank you.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Stay tuned.